So for today, we will touch on the next phase of project management, which is monitoring and control. Okay, so there are calculations in monitoring and control. Particularly, we will touch on earned value management. Okay, so that will come next week. So for today, we'll complete or basically cover on the theoretical part, and the calculation will come next week. Okay, but for tomorrow is basically on time cost optimization. Okay, so we skip that for today, and we'll go into the next chapter or the next topic like here lah. Okay, so basically what we did in the past. Okay, so the precedence diagram or the time of cost optimization, it is part of project planning. Okay, so whereby you come up with schedule, and this is the way forward. Okay, so each activity, when it's supposed to start, when it's supposed to end. So what comes after that would be your plan into action. Okay, so you have done a schedule, tapi if you don't put it in action, pun tak guna. Okay, so this is where you execute your schedule, and you monitor and control the situation and what you have planned for. Okay, so at the end of this, you should be able to understand what is monitoring and control, and understand the methods in construction. Okay, so importantly is to have a schedule. That was what, yes? Tak share ke? Okay, important for us to have a schedule whereby this is what we provided in the last. Okay, so we come up with activities, early start, early finish for each activity. So that is our schedule. Okay, each activity when it's supposed to start. But if we just remains as that, okay, just for the sake of applying for the project, dah dapat project tu, lupakan, then it means nothing. Okay, so you need to put that schedule into action. So your activities needs to be arranged based on that schedule, and you need to monitor your progress. Okay, so that's why this topic is following that. Basically, that talks about monitoring the progress, and if there are any changes to the progress, particularly your what do we call it, your progress or your current whatever you're doing on the site differs from your plan, that is where you need to control. Okay, this topic is pretty straightforward. Monitoring and control. You monitor, you control. Itu je. Cuma we have a calculation on earned value nanti. So earned value is where we measure and we highlight whether are we delayed, are we on time, are we above the cost, are we within the cost, and so on. Okay, so importantly for us to actually use the schedule. So no point kita submit schedule, but it is not to any use. Okay, so as an introduction, okay, to what actually comes about until monitoring and control. So when we talk about project planning, okay, or when we talk about project management, it starts with whereby owner identify the objective. Okay, so if you can still recall, we started project management dengan the first phase of project or the first element of project management, which is project definition. Okay, so project definition is where we define the project, we come up with project charter, okay, and then we kickstart the project, okay, and then yang kita go about dengan project planning and so on. Okay, so we start with owner's objective and when the objective have been met. Okay, so the purpose basically is to make sure the project design, budget, schedule are met by the project team. Okay, so meaning to say that the scope, the cost, the time could be adhered by the project team, right? So that's the very reason that we are trying to conduct project management, so that at the end of the day, the process that we have actually done could address or could accommodate the objective that has been set earlier. Okay, so meaning to say the common one would be time, cost, and also quality. Okay, And if any objective begin to deviate, correction can be made. So this is where the control action comes into picture, right? So when we talk about monitor and control, is action based. Okay, so we don't have schedule, jalankan activity, and we just couldn't bother about the progress. Tak boleh. So you need to monitor. So which means it requires action. Okay, so it whether you are monitoring daily, weekly, monthly. So because the way of reporting is slightly different. Okay, so monthly is commonly through meeting. So daily is maybe your information dissemination through your supervisor to the workers. Okay, so and at the end of the day, you recheck whether the workers have completed the tasks have been assigned. So you need that so that your progress is on dot. Okay, so if you don't monitor, it could deviate. Okay, so your workers might not be following your instruction, ataupun actually you have various other factors, supplier problem, or actually it's the weather. So normally even weather we monitor. Okay, so we have daily work schedule, ataupun we have daily report that highlights, okay, today, and if you can, if you have known basically in the daily report is where we identify 12 hours, okay, raining at what time to what time. So it's important for you to actually document um, daily weather and so on, so that at the end of the day, if there is a delay to the project, and maybe you think that it is 1 week of raining or 2-3 days of full raining, you can actually use that as a reason or factor to apply extension of time. Okay, so it's very important for us to monitor, not only monitor and document. The monitor without documentation is meaningless. So basically you just observe tapi tak document. So benda tu is, it will not do anything. How can you claim that I observe something, kan? Okay, so it should be documented. And once you want to apply for any extension of time or so on, or reasoning for the delay, you have that in a proper documented manner. Okay. So monitoring is action based. Okay, and it encourage continual monitoring. Okay, so it requires you to be continuous. Tak adalah monitoring 1 week and then the next week tak monitor, tak boleh. So you have to monitor it at a ongoing basis. Okay. Monitoring is where we compare the standard and the variance. So if you look into the slide, there are a lot of words which are similar, I mean synonym, tapi used in different context lah, different slide. So for example, project baseline, okay, project benchmark. So those are the one that you produce at the planning level. Okay, so you produce it and then you would measure, okay, with the progress that you're doing on site. So the variance will be the variance between the standard and the actual. Okay. So what's monitoring is trying for us to understand what is happening on the site. If you don't monitor, you don't know what is happening. If you don't know what is happening, you are not sure how are you going to defend yourself in a meeting. Okay, so because if your progress is well, it's fine. But if your progress is behind the schedule or over the budget, you need to know what is happening. So you need, because in the meeting, you need to be answerable to the client, to the consultant, to the QS who's going to assess this thing. Okay, so you need to know what is happening on the project, and you obtain information about the project by some means. Okay, how do you want to understand? One, as a project manager, is not feasible for you to be observing the site from morning until evening. No project manager will do that. Okay, so you need to get your information from means. Daripada siapa? From the engineer, from the site supervisor, But is it true verbal? So if it's true verbal, pun tak boleh. Okay. So that's why if you look into construction site, there are documents. So on a daily basis, they call it daily worksheet, for example, or daily diary or daily report. Okay. So in the daily report, you would have items such as weather, very important. Okay. So normally there will be like in a pie chart or pie basically divided into 12 so that you can allocate, okay, cerah mana, rainy, and then, so things like that. Um, or else, other than that, in the daily schedule, we also have workers on site, not workers, more to managerial personnel on site. Okay, so normally workers, we don't calculate by head. Okay, because it will be subcon to subcontractor. So on tapi normally we'll have, okay, how many project managers on site, project engineers, skill workers, okay, truck drivers, excavator drivers, and so on. Okay, so you will have that personnel on site. Other than that, materials that have gone through testing, or if you have material on site as well. So these are the information that you can gather at a daily basis, and then it could be consolidated into a weekly based report so that you know, okay, if there are any delay, what could be the potential problems. So at least the daily report could reflect so. Okay. So what is control? So once you actually done the monitoring, you obtain information, identify what is the current situation, what is the progress. Okay, so even in the daily, you can actually check what is the progress and compare it with the baseline. Then, if there are any deviation, then your control action comes into picture. Okay, control is to control the deviation. So whether it's time, okay, so you realize that after 2-3 days, rupanya there is a delay. Okay, you need to take control action. So what shall we do? Shall we add on workers? Shall we add on workers and material? You need to check on the situation. The longer you delay it, okay, so the longer the delay, probably you just realize the delay comes after 1 week. Lambat lah. Okay, so you might lose grip, and it will take a bigger effort, okay, to actually get your schedule into the baseline. Okay, so control needs to be taken in speedy manner lah. Okay. So what do we monitor? We monitor the cost. Okay, so we can actually identify what do we spend, what have we spent, and input from the client as well. So normally monthly payment, you can check the income and what you have spent on the costing. So you would know how much you have overspent or under budget of a certain project based on duration. Okay, so from the duration, you can actually check from the BQ. So these activities for 1 month, how much should it cost? Okay, so whether we have over budget, under budget, and so on. Time as well. Okay, so it's easy for you to monitor and control. So because we have the S-curve. Okay, so once we have the S-curve, we can identify what activities to be done when, and have we conducted that. But quality, how do we monitor quality on the site? Any idea on that? How do we monitor quality on a site?
Time consume.
Time?
Yes, either the project delay or not.
Okay, that one is time lah. How about quality? Quality. Time we can measure, betul? Whether again?
Testing.
Testing, okay, correct. So we do conduct testing, for example, concrete tests. Okay, so we send the test cube. So we take sample, send the test cube for testing. So to make sure that the concrete is in the strength that we require. Simply kalau if you're concreting there and there, you want to do testing, slump test, easy. Okay, so we test the material. Other than that, workmanship, do we test ke tak? Do we have anything to monitor on how good the workmanship of the workers or of what is being expected?
Yes.
Yes, kan? Who will do that? So,
Consultant.
consultant, so we have clerk of work. Okay, so clerk of work usually the representative of architect, and then we have resident engineer RE. Okay, so this can be a consultant lah, structural CNS ke. Okay, so what happens on the site to ensure that the contractor is following the specification that has been given in the contract. Okay, so we have drawing. Satu, we have specification as well. So drawing is a drawing, for example, reinforcement bar. So the resident engineer needs to check whether the exact reinforcement bar has been provided, T10 ke 20 ke, okay, so has been laid. Lapping, okay, as well as the cover. So those are the things resident engineer would need to inspect before concreting. Okay, so if that is not being done, and the contractor just placing any reinforcement bar concrete, something happened later, okay, accident or the structural failure, then it will be the fault of the resident engineer. So the resident engineer or RE needs to be really careful in before ensuring that, okay, the reinforcement bar is in the good position and could be concreted. Then the contractor is allowed to concrete. So there is like a check and balance kat sana. Okay, so for structural, RE mostly check on that lah. Okay, so make sure the reinforcement bar is not too corroded. Clean, I mean, at least brush off if there are corrosion. Okay, so the lapping, so the size of the reinforcement bar is as what being given in the drawing. Okay, so that is RE. On the architect as well. Okay, so the architect clerk of work. Okay, so the clerk of work will look into architecture elements. Okay, so for example, the material used for tiling, is it the exact material? And then if there are any columns, for example, even RE needs to check into the column, the straightness of the columns and so on. Okay, so some of the things that could be checked. Okay, so basically you have RE and architect to ensure the work on the site complies to the specification and drawing. Okay, so besides that, if a contractor or if a client wants to go further than that, okay, so RE, architect, they can actually also measure using certain criterias. Okay, the simplest would be QLASIK from CIDB. Okay, so CIDB is having this like checklist, okay, to check on the workmanship of the contractor. So that's why sometimes you can see banners of new project rated, okay, QLASIK 80% compliance or 80%. So it means the workmanship is good by the contractor, certified good by the contractor. So cuma obviously if a contractor wants that kind of signage or banner dipamerkan, which mean the what do you call certified by CIDB, obviously they need to call in the personnel, do the checking, measure, and being certified. If let's say a contractor is not moving towards certification ke apa, is just to measure themselves, obviously I think the checklist boleh digunakan. Okay, so there are a lot of items there to measure the workmanship. Okay, the slope provided at the bathroom, so things macam tu, so that things are as good lah. Okay, so actually quality we do measure. okay, or we do actually monitor. So it will be monitored on site, and further or additional initiative could be done if you want to actually being recognized, okay, that your quality is top notch. So you can actually do this QLASIC by CIDP. Okay, so this is just a recap of major phases in project management. So we are planning, and then we have done the analysis, we scheduling each activity start, finish, and then usually once you have done the schedule, then you have the monitoring and control. Okay, the word control, it comes hand in hand with monitoring. Okay, so you can't control if you do not monitor. So you can't control if you have not monitored anything. So you monitor, then you control. Okay, so whereby you utilize the feedback through monitoring, assemble the facts, assess the alternative, and make your decision. How do you control the deviations? Okay, so I think a lot of words kat sini sebenarnya I've mentioned it. Okay, can be achieved through proper program, logically planned, constantly reviewed, closely monitored. So that's why when we are doing monitoring and control, it goes back to your project schedule. If your project schedule was not being done in a realistic manner, monitor and control, it will not help you much. Okay, so if your schedule is wrong, then your monitoring and control pun no point. Okay, so first thing first, you need to make sure the schedule is as realistic and as correct as possible. Okay, so your time duration estimation, it needs to be correct. Your sequence of activity, it needs to be correct. Wrongly placed, then what's the point of monitoring and control? Okay, boleh you realize the problem lah. Okay, so you realize the issue, just need to repair balik and so on. Okay, so well, monitoring and control needs to come hand in hand with a proper schedule. Then everything will go smoothly. Okay, so that's why it's important that it has been logically planned. Okay, also important to anticipate events and build contingency plan into a project if any unexpected deviation. So this is where sometimes we do risk management or risk assessment, especially if we are talking about critical activities. Okay, so we have identified from the schedule that we have several critical activities. So that is where usually critical activities are risky. If there are any delay to that, it will delay the entire project. Hence, risk assessment, contingency plan, backup plan could be thought through for critical activities. Okay, just to like create a bolster. If anything, any issue, supply issue, and so on to that critical activity, you know what to do. Okay. Okay, it's important to ensure smooth, it's fine. Okay, monitoring, you will see from slide to slide, it will be repetitive in nature because it basically comes back to you. Monitoring is to compare actual with the plan. Okay, so actual is your actual progress, plan is your baseline ke standard ke. So you can see that I mentioned that the words mean the same thing. Okay, so you will be comparing the current, actual against baseline, plan. Okay, so that is monitoring. So your work schedule can be can be referred to master program, weekly, monthly, subcontractor, material procurement, any term that an organization uses. Okay, so, I think this I've mentioned. Okay, so able to identify, measure the difference, actual plan. If there are any deviation, control action needs to be taken. Okay, so to make sure that you can bring back the deviation into what we have basically planned for. Okay, so classic control stages, you need to measure, you compare, you take corrective action. So same goes to here. Okay, so you need to make a plan, implement the plan, monitor the actual and record it, report, compare the actual and the plan and take action. Okay, so there's quite a lot of repetitive, but I guess this is just to make sure that, you know, it is monitoring, that is what it is. Okay, monitoring and control. So if you look into this, okay, so the first 4 stages, stage 1 to stage 4, okay, so basically is where you start making plan until you monitor. Stage 5 is where you take control action. Okay, so first 4 stages are monitoring. Okay, so it gives you quantitative information on which control action may be based. Okay, so if there are any absence of formal information, then you can take action based on hunches. Tapi this is not advisable lah. Commonly, this is what we do. Okay, commonly we monitor there are any deviation, then we take control action macam tu. Whether you add on workers or work overtime, work several nights overtime, work over the weekends or something like that. Tapi importantly sebenarnya at the end of the day, you need to properly collect the information so that you know what is the root cause of the problem. Sometimes just solving it there and there boleh. You can just solve it short term lah. Okay, you need to get the root to the root of it. What is the real issue? It can be issue among your workers. It can be your workers who are actually purposely delaying your work done, or it can be the problem from the supplier. You need to know for sure. Just mere observing, monitoring, but did not really get that formal documentation out, dia sometimes will mislead our judgment and it will mislead our decision. In fact, any decision we make, not only project, but also in your daily activities or in your real life. Okay, so you need to know what you are dealing with. Sometimes kita buat keputusan based on hearsay. Okay, orang A cakap orang B with hearsay. So sometimes that one would what we call it would mislead our judgment. Okay, so it shouldn't be done there. It should be done in a very systematic, objective, and you are well informed. Okay, decision very important. You make a decision which is well informed. A well informed decision maksudnya you have all the facts and figures with you, and you make a decision based on, okay, I have the pro, cons, I have everything laid out, and make the decision. Okay, so that's important not only for this, even for your decision making in your life and so on. So why do we monitor and control? Okay, so there are many reasons lah, but amongst that, so that the project could be completed within the duration. Okay, so refrain from getting LAD. LAD ni liquidated certain damages. In short, basically penalty lah. Penalty for delay. Okay, so obviously when we are doing a project, the worst thing is if you dikenakan LAD, because you cannot complete the project as being signed in the contract. Okay, so normally in the contract will be stated if you delay for 1 day, how much is the penalty? If the project is small, can be a few thousand, but if your project is big, can be 10 over 1,000 for 1 day, delay of 1 day. Okay, so you have to be very careful lah dengan LAD ni. So LAD ni, okay, so that's why we have extension of time. So let's say you have a contractor have actually exceeded the duration given in the contract, you can apply for extension of time. But your reasoning must be strong and valid as given in the contract document. Normally, obviously, the reasons you can give if the delay is not caused by you, okay, is caused by third party. For example, consultant delay in providing information. Let's say you have some constraint on the site, on the drawing, you requested for RFI, request for information, tapi the consultant came back to you after 1 week. So those are the things that you need to collect so that if there are any requirement for extension of time, it could be used as a proof. Okay, so other than that, to maximize profit, okay, so to maintain a good image, right? So if you progress too fast, it could increase your cost. If you progress too slow, it could also increase your cost. So this one, you should know the reason why after you go through the recording tomorrow on time cost optimization. Okay, so because we have direct costs and indirect costs. Okay, so that will be for you tomorrow. Okay, so effective monitoring and control, obviously, the best will be daily monitoring, the best. Okay, whereby you have discussion in the morning, you know what have been scoped for the day. So meaning to say that as an engineer, you need to know what tasks to be dedicated to the supervisor, to the head of workers. Okay, discuss with them, provided in the morning. Okay, and discuss with them at the end of the day, completed or not completed within the time frame given. If it has not been completed, whether do you require extension of working time, or it could be done at the end of the week or so. Okay, so especially if you have critical activity involved. If you have critical activity, you can delay even for 1 day. So these activities should be boosted. Okay. And you may also have fortnightly meeting to discuss the requirement with the site personnel. Okay, so whether you have any issue on the workers or supply and so on to make sure that the supplies are there. Okay, so how often depends on the complexity. So if the project is under scrutiny, obviously daily base lah, okay. But if the project is not that under scrutiny, but so probably it could be done on a weekly, fortnightly, if it's not that critical, okay. Especially if project with too complex, okay. So material from overseas and various suppliers. So obviously you need to see whether the material is on dot. Okay, but if you're talking about activities which are repetitive, pipe laying macam tu, so maybe benda yang sama je. So maybe it's at a weekly basis. So really depends on the type of project. Okay, so project standard. Okay, so basically for you to actually conduct project control, you have project standard. Okay, so your project standard or project baseline, it could be drawn in S-curve. Okay, so if you have seen through some progress report, so normally S-curve is as such. Okay, so normally you have a baseline and you will monitor at periodic manner. Okay, so month 1, where is your actual? Kat sini ke? Month 2, kat sini ke? Okay, so is this. So let's say you have achieved this. Okay, so which means here basically for month 1, month 2, month 3, you are not progressing as you have planned for. But however, let's say you shoot up, you make the corrective rectification, corrective action, and for month 4, you actually exceeded. Okay, so it provides you good progress basically. So you need to monitor at whether weekly or monthly level of the S-curve. So in order for you to monitor, you need to start by having the standard, the baseline, the S-curve ni. Okay, so it can be in the form of cost, schedule, quality. If you have quality, not in S-curve lah. Okay, so quality could be in the form of specification that you have provided. You want to translate that into checklist pun boleh. Okay, so standards are used to check progress, direction. Drawing specification is to ensure quality control. Measurement standards serve as a goal. So the next component, okay, so while you have already established your standard, you need to identify your actual. Okay, so what is actually ongoing on the site? So you need to get accurate cost that you have spent, that you have received. Okay, accurate schedule and quality information. Okay, so then you compare the actual and your plan. And how do we get that? On-site review, walkthrough, quantity reports. Okay, so this is where we talk about daily reports. Okay, so I did mention just now daily reports. You have staff on site. Okay, where you have weather, material on site. Okay, or also you can have progress charted. Okay. So this is basically a simple example lah. Okay. All right. So this theory basically is similar. Okay. So you initiate the plan. Okay. So you have planning ready, and then you conduct your work. Okay. So this is where you have your network schedule ready. You have your activities conducted, operation. However, there might be factors affecting, especially if you're talking about supply, COVID situation would have created major issue for us. Okay, so external factors, and then you need to collect actual field data. Okay, and if there are any recommendation analysis being done by the schedule, analyze, recommend action to the project manager to take action. Okay, and project manager would adjust the plan as needed, the as-built plan. Okay. So when we're talking about monitoring and control, actually, if we are talking about delay, the research or the studies being done have started from ages ago. Okay, so you can see that these are some of the reasons they provide for delay. Okay, so labor, design issues, slow performance. So a lot of reasons or various reasons that could actually give way to delay. Okay, so same goes to this. Okay, so, and we are talking about this since 1964. Even now, we are having the same problem. Okay, so we are talking about decades and decades and decades of problem. Sama je. Okay, you will still get all of these issues nowadays. Okay, so this is, for example. Okay, so this one tak ada apa sangat. Okay, so the baseline. Okay, so baseline, cost baseline or time baseline. So cost control is basically not part of your syllabus sangat. Okay, so but I'll just quickly walk through je. So it's not exactly part of your course of study, but we'll just go through fast. Okay. So cost basically the contractor is to ensure do not lose the profit. Okay, so constraint to cover. Okay, so basically cost is in terms of the cost itulah. So you plan, you monitor action for the cost control. So managing cost tak ada apa sangat lah. Okay, so it's similar to time. Okay, so you just need to compare the plan cost against the actual. Okay, okay, it's similar. Okay, so benefits, obviously, when we're talking about cost control, for contractor, they're looking for the profit. Okay, so the factors that could affect any costs, especially if there are changes during construction, design changes, for example, if there are any shortage of skilled labor, okay, unforeseen shortage of material, because when we delay a project, it may incur additional costs. Okay, so delay in checking, inadequate machinery, and so on. Okay, another word that some of you might have heard or might not have heard is basically variation order. In terms of cost control, okay, so when we are trying to control our cost, we want it to be within the contract sum. However, sometimes on site, contractor might come into work task which is not within the contract instruction. Okay, it is not in the drawing, it is not in the drawing, or it is not in the specification and not in the schedule. So whatever job scope that has been identified by the contractor, but it is not within the contract, it is called variation order. So it is additional work scope that would be additional cost to the client. Okay, so the client has paid for, let's say, 1 million for this job task in the contract sum. However, let's say the contractor has identified that there are some activity which was not accounted for in the contract. If it is necessary and the consultant and client agrees that that additional work scope is necessary, then it will incur additional costs to the client, and contractor will have additional costs or additional profit in addition to the contract sum sign off lah. Okay, so so that's a variation order. Okay, so but obviously any variation order identified by the contractor must be agreed by the client because it's additional cost to the contract. Okay. So these are basically simple Gantt chart. Okay, and this is the S-curve that I've mentioned. Typically in construction project, it is common for us to actually, this is the most common or this is the chart that people want to see. At the end of the month, you have progress report, written what has been done and so on. Tapi the main important figure that wants to be seen by the client is this one. Whether are you here or are you here in terms of the progress? Okay, so, or are you just perfectly here, which is the best? Okay, so if it's here, it will cause question mark. You need to justify why are you behind it and so on. Okay, so in terms of S-curve. Okay, so basically S-curve is the baseline. Okay, so it's cost loaded. I think if we have time, because this is already week 12, but I want to introduce S-curve. So probably I'll find a time in between to see how we can slot to come up with an S-curve. Okay, so S-curve is where we measure the progress. Okay. One thing, okay, so if we look into the progress in terms of cost, okay, so if you're talking about the cost factor, if you are spending, let's say this is week 6, okay, your spending is here, but your activity supposed to spend this much, you are basically under the budget. Okay, so with your activity that you have done, you have spent kurang daripada what you have planned for. But if your S-curve is based on time, okay, if you are progressing here and your time is supposed to be here based on the costing, you have actually, you are behind schedule. Don't worry about this first. I will discuss about this in detail in earned value management. Okay, so we'll go through earned value management to see how actually the time and the cost factor comes into picture. Okay, so just KIV that for the earned value calculation nanti. Okay, so basically this is just application of coming up with a baseline. Okay, so obviously to come up with that, you need to have the drawing, specification, contract, come up with the work breakdown structure. Okay, so divide it into activities, come up with a schedule, come up with the estimated duration. Okay, so this is where we have done until project planning. Okay, create a schedule. So the final one is basically to come up with the S-curve and to track for you to monitor and control and report in the progress report. Okay, so this is where I hope we still have the time so that we can actually create this S-curve. But the next class, basically, we'll talk on the earned value management. Okay, all right. So far, any question for today's class on the theoretical part of monitoring and control?
No question, Doctor.
Clear ke? So I think it's pretty straightforward lah on this. Maybe in terms of calculation, earn value nanti maybe a little bit tricky, but I think this is pretty clear. Okay. All right. So if there are no other question, we will stop the class here.